audience. I may get some close-ups of these guys' faces. That's okay.
What we'd like is for everybody to kind of gather in. We got a little song here in the people's key of G. Are we ready, boys?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Oh, if your mind is weary and your heart is feeling low, sometimes it seems there ain't no place to go. Remember who you are and live the way you do. Ain't nobody gonna mess with you if you stand up. Stand up. I'd say we had no choice. Stand up. Stand up. Now let me hear your voice. Stand up. Stand up. Now let me hear you say, stand up. Stand up. I ain't taking no more today.
Outside of Forks, Washington, townspeople gather for the wake of Larry Mason's sawmill. Stand up, the song urges. An anthem for timber-dependent communities throughout the Pacific Northwest and all those who support them.
I ain't taking no more today. It's a sawmill that my wife and I have put 20 years into developing, and then at its peak in 1988 employed 40 local people. It's really hard to explain what that means. It's more than steel, and it's more than lumber, and it's more than dollars. It's spirit, it's blood, and it's sweat. It's a dream. We built a sawmill that was a dream of how...
And if you take the land, take people from the land, or take their business from them, then they go through a personal sense of loss, which is very similar to a death. A part of themselves dies, particularly when it's on us.
Dr. Robert Lee is a former forester, now a sociologist and professor at the University of Washington's College of Forest Resources. For 20 years, he has been applying sociology to the problems of forestry, in particular, the timber-dependent communities of the Pacific Northwest.
While on the surface, Forks may appear still to be a highly successful community, immediately under the surface, we're already seeing signs of social collapse.
Many communities are living under the threat of imminent strangulation, feeling the noose tighten as their economy, their towns, and their very lives are shut down in a political fight over our national resources. In Forks alone, domestic violence is up 45% this year. The community mental health caseload was up 22% last year. Juveniles charged with assault up 148%. Welfare grants for single-parent households increased 137%.
Say it's as if they're living under a death sentence and they don't know the day that their execution is scheduled. They don't know whether to live today, enjoy today, or whether today is the day that the bottom is going to fall out.
For KVAC KLLM, this is a special report. We now go to Don Ice at the Forks Sheriff's Department.
Today, officers of the Clallam County Sheriff's Department were called to the scene of an apparent suicide. They report that a 31-year-old logger facing prospects of unemployment sat down on the couch in the family room of his mobile home, put a 9mm handgun to his chest, and pulled the trigger. He leaves behind a wife and 3 children. According to officials, the mill where he worked...
In the Seattle federal court today, Judge William Dwyer sided with environmentalists seeking to stop the harvesting of timber in the Pacific Northwest. They claim the northern spotted owl is threatened with extinction. Many consider Dwyer's decision to be a fatal blow to the many timber-dependent communities.
It's not a northern spotted owl. It's a 10-year-old girl with large brown eyes that is going to see her parents lose everything that they have. Someone had better listen to us. This is wrong.
It's scary when you got a family to know that That job could be lost at any time, any moment, any day. It's scary for my kids.
The kids will be hurt. They're the innocent ones. It's hard because your heart breaks, you know, if you have any kind of compassion.
They're living under constant uncertainty, and they see that honest people are being destroyed, and they're crying because they don't understand how that can happen in America.
Because if they do us like that, you know, I don't know what kind of Christmas we're going to have.
Well, what was said at your last meeting?
Well, I don't know. They were talking about maybe that or maybe shutting the shift down, so I don't know.
Where would you work? What would you do?
I don't know. There ain't nothing else around here.
Why do you think you might lose your job?
Well, bud.
Families like John and Julie Lewis of Montague, California, are praying every day that what is happening in Forks never happens to them or their sons, John Jr. and Adam. But Northern California is also facing a crisis.
You know, a lot of me.
In June 1991, when federal Judge Dwyer drastically restricted timber sales on federal lands, the ostensible purpose was to protect the habitat of the northern spotted owl. This nocturnal bird is a so-called indicator species. Environmentalists claim that its numbers are dwindling, reflecting a broader ecological deterioration. Other experts show evidence that these owls are plentiful and multiplying in a wide variety of habitat. Although the facts are in heated dispute, the northern spotted owl is considered a threatened species by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and on that basis, Judge Dwyer complied with the demands of environmentalists to stop federal timber sales. That decision began a fatal chain reaction. With no federal timber in the raw materials pipeline, mills are closing. Timber reserve funds, which make up large percentages of local school budgets, are slashed. Unemployment is rising rapidly.
A lot of people are going to be homeless. There'll be a lot of divorces. There'll be more suicides. There'll be more children on the streets. There'll be more abused children, abused spouses, and that this kind of pain is going to echo through the region for years and years to come.
Tens of thousands of jobs, over 100,000 by some estimates, and many times that number of human lives are threatened. With the facts about the owl in doubt, how can our government risk its greatest resource, its people? Some towns, like Forks, Washington, are already collapsing. Others, like Montague, California, fearfully wait for their turn. While environmentalists and bureaucrats argue and stake out politically acceptable positions, the human tragedy is unfolding.
What I've said is there's a new indicator species in Northern California, and it's a 10-year-old girl that wants to know why her father doesn't have a job this year. And if we look at the indicator species, the child in Northern California, in a rural county, that indicator species is not doing well at all.
Indeed, if you're observant of children's behavior, you will see the very first level of family disorientation or dysfunction. You can see tension and family strife arising in how children perform at school. You can see it in their play activity as they play out aggression. You can see it in their classwork. The problem is going to be the communities of this area, the Happy Camps, the Weeds, the McLeods, the Wairicas, the Montague. That's where the problem is. 25% of the revenue that's generated on the sale of timber on national forest lands is returned to the county of origin. In Siskiyou County, our county schools received $4 million last year. If we lose these revenues, we will have to cut counselors, teachers, school psychologists, school nurses, and educational consultants, all of which will have a direct impact on the children's programs.
Take a look at it.
For many families in Siskiyou County, the lumber industry or timber industry has been a part of their heritage. Their 4 and 5 generations of family that have worked in the woods or worked in the mill. These people consider themselves the true environmentalists.
You can take places where we've worked, or my dad's worked, his dad's worked 25, 30 years ago.
But, you know, I like to walk through them stands of timber and realize that our future, there's a great future here in America. What better situation could you have? You know, you have an oil industry that when you take that oil out of the ground, it's gone. But out here we have a timber industry that's renewable. We call it renewable, and we say it's renewable because we know it's renewable. Just plain and simple. And there's nothing better than a young forest that is growing good and strong, and you know that that's the future.
Well, the government established these sustained yield units and very successfully developed communities throughout the West that would depend on federal timber supplies, and promised people that there would be wood in perpetuity to support the communities. And people put down their roots, built their homes, invested in mills, formed ties with one another, and learned to love that way of life, and now are very confused and angered and feel betrayed because the government has all of a sudden changed its mind and has withdrawn its promises and is no longer going to provide these assured wood supplies.
Feelings of betrayal, confusion, and anger are made more painful because the timber workers live every day surrounded by enormous supplies of renewable resources. The answer to saving their businesses, their towns, their families is growing tall and strong right outside the very windows of their homes.
The bottom line is that these are political decisions to reallocate federal assets from timber production on a sustained yield basis to preservation. And there's no economic necessity. This is not like the steel crisis. This is not even like the farm crisis. These are not economic events. These are political events. And if Congress or the administration would decide that we needed a different direction or a middle road, then in fact public officials would get very different kinds of marching orders.
But for some people, like Forester Dave Marshall, feelings of betrayal and anger are growing even more because they think their government isn't really listening.
I sat right there and watched a lot of good people give good testimony, documented testimony to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they walked out of the room like it didn't even occur. And yet somebody else comes along and it's a crime to cut a tree, and that becomes evidence.
I've heard a lot of folks blaming the owl for social and economic woes in this region. However, based on both timber industry and government factual reports, it is automation, exports, foreign labor, and non-sustainable logging practices that are the real culprits of job loss in the Northwest. And the owl is simply being used as a scapegoat by the failing timber industry in this regard.
The misnomer that automation and exports count for a lot of the layoffs in the timber industry is something that's not very well understood. Here at McLeod, this facility is in the top 25% of automated sawmills, and we were state-of-the-art about 7 years ago. And we export no logs here. There's very few logs in the state of California exported, and we've already reduced the amount of people that we have here based on the amount of logs that we've been able to get. And so if we had more logs, we could hire back more people and run this facility at a fuller capacity than we are right now. Know of in this area.
5 years ago, Wairika Division began an automation program. We finished it just this last year with a $2 million facility off to my right. Actually, we added people when we completed that project. If we have to lay people off, it's not because of automation, it's not because of money we spend in the plant, it's because of the uncertainty in our timber supply.
What will happen if we cannot get logs from the public lands on which we are totally dependent? It means that our plant will shut down. It means that 150 of our employees will lose their job.
Morning, John. How are you? I've been working in the lumber business for 24 years now. My grandfather worked in the lumber mill as a millwright. My dad is a certified lumber grader. I have two brothers. One works up in Oregon in the plywood plant, and another one works down in Anderson area unloading and loading logging trucks. So it wouldn't only be me, it would be my entire family.
This facility here in Happy Camp is 100% dependent on Forest Service timber. The Forest Service at present has been stopped from selling timber sales. There's none in the immediate future, and we're looking at right here approximately in our yard about a 5-month supply of logs that we have to maintain the mill. So we're looking at possibly within a year having 160 less employed people in Happy Camp. That's a big chunk of the population when you consider there's only about 1,200 people in Happy Camp.
I read Dwyer's decision, and his decision says that the listing of critical habitat on the Pacific Northwest will have absolutely no economic consequences. Well, here I am. My husband's lost his job. We've been through bad times before, but nothing like this.
If 120 people lose their job here at McLeod, here at P&M Cedar Products, it's not because of automation, and it's not because of exports. It's because we don't have enough logs to run this facility.
I'm an independent trucker, and I own and drive my own truck. A year ago, work was plentiful, and I could work 6 or 7 days a week. Now I'm lucky if I can work 2 or 3, and next week there might not be any work. At the present time, my family doesn't have anything to look forward to in the future.
Hey, Mike, I heard there's been some talk about going to one shift, like we were talking out there in the clip a little while ago. What's the deal on that?
Because of the uncertainty of log supply, we're thinking of a conservation mode, conservation in terms of logs. Here at Timber Products Division, we have about 4 or 5 months logs, which you see behind me. If we don't get a continued supply, we're going to run out. And when we do, we're going to put 70 people out of work.
If Timber Products does have to put 70 people out of work, one of them will be John Lewis.
You know, you never really expect it to happen like this, you know, spotted owl issue like that. You never think supposedly a bird is going to cause so many problems, but I guess they consider it all right to endanger my children, the welfare of my children, but not to endanger the owl. I tell you, the only way we could solve this is walking a mile in my shoes. That's the only thing I could think of. If you were in my place and see how I felt and had to support this family through the timber industry, and it was your livelihood, I mean, I think you'd think twice. I really do. Give me a double scoop of strawberry.
Double scoop of strawberry.
Oh, boy. Look at that, John. It's a big thing there. Good? I bet it is. They depend on Daddy for support. And when you take that away from a man, when you take his job like that, you're taking his self-esteem, and he feels weak and afraid and lonely and scared about his future and his family's future. It's looking pretty good, John.
People have had their very future selves taken from them. And it affects their sense of continuity and their faith in other people and their faith in their country, their faith in their government. It's very similar to what happened to Vietnam vets who thought that they were doing a great service to their country. Now we have loggers and mill workers and others who are told that they are tree murderers. And it's enormously painful to have the whole society turn on them and exclude them.
Okay, thanks much. Have a good one now. I don't like to think about it too much because it worries me for them. You know, not so much myself, but it worries me for them. Because the best way to hurt a man is, or I should say the worst way to hurt a man is to hurt his family. And that's what's happening here with all these men. All the men in the timber industry. And many of them already have been hurt by losing their jobs. Their families been hurt, their kids. And it's something that's kind of hard to talk about, but it's true, and people got to know it. There's got to be a common ground somewhere where there can be a compromise. There has to be.
The future of these children is at risk. Their educational opportunities, their opportunities to grow up and enjoy life.
I get so upset while Congress debates things and they say, well, we'll put it off for another month and I can gain more power by taking this position and then I'll go over to that side. While these men take positions on how it will benefit their political career, there are people in Northern California suffering, losing their jobs. Children are being devastated beyond belief, while these men are playing games with our lives, and we're not going to tolerate it anymore. We want action right now.
Why can't some people realize there's a job someone must do to take out the old timber so the forest can renew itself for tomorrow and grow straight and strong. Trees are like our children and the growing don't take long. We will stand up. Stand up! I'd say we had no choice. Stand up. Stand up! Now let me hear your voice. Stand up. Stand up! Now let me hear you say, stand up! Stand up! I ain't taking no more today.